A very ambitious theory, Dr. Zainab.
The first person to laugh was Professor Han. It was not loud. That somehow made it worse. A quiet breath through his nose. A glance toward the professors sitting around the long walnut table. Then a small smile, as though Zainab Afolayan had accidentally wandered into one of the most important research meetings in Seoul and mistaken fantasy for science. Two board members smiled with him. Zainab kept one hand around the presentation remote. On the screen behind her was the thing she had spent 5 years building. S-17. A low-cost fire-resistant composite panel made from rice husk silica, basalt microfibers and a mineral binder she had modified more times than she could remember. Professor Han leaned back. 28% lighter than conventional fireboard? Yes. 31% cheaper at scale? Approximately. And it survives direct flame exposure longer than the material currently used by several multinational construction companies? According to 3 independent tests, yes. A younger professor chuckled. Han looked toward him. Then perhaps we should all resign and allow Miss Afolayan to solve the construction industry's problems alone. The laughter came faster. Zainab felt heat behind her eyes. She did not blink. At the far end of the table, one man had not smiled. Chairman Yoon Tae-gyeom. 37. Chairman of Haesun Group. Construction. Shipping. Industrial materials. Hotels. Infrastructure. He had said nothing since she entered. Now he was staring at the screen. Not at her. At the microscopic image beside her thermal results. Professor Han continued. Your confidence is admirable, Miss Afolayan. Unfortunately, confidence is not peer review. My results were independently replicated. Where? The University of Nairobi. Han's mouth tightened slightly. Not exactly MIT. Nobody laughed this time. Zainab looked around the table. Scientific instruments don't change accuracy according to passport. Professor Han's expression hardened. Be careful. No, Professor. You asked where the results were replicated. I answered. Your funding is being reviewed today. I know. Then perhaps you should remember why you are in this room. Zainab's fingers tightened around the remote. Before she could answer, a chair scraped against the floor. Everyone turned. Chairman Yoon Tae-gyeom was standing. Professor Han straightened immediately. Chairman? Tae-gyeom walked toward the screen. Go back. Zainab frowned. Sorry? 2 slides. She clicked backward. He shook his head. 1 more. The image changed. A magnified cross-section of S-17 appeared. Tae-gyeom stopped directly beneath it. His face had changed. Zainab knew that look. Not disbelief. Recognition. Where did you get this geometry? I developed it. When? The first stable version was 14 months ago. Who has seen it? My research team. My supervisor. The Independent Verification Laboratory. Professor Han stood. Chairman Yoon, if there is a concern about confidentiality, the university will cooperate fully. Tae-gyeom ignored him. He looked directly at Zainab. What do you call the formulation? S-17. Why 17? She hesitated. My father died on September 17th. Something shifted behind his eyes. Then he turned toward the executives sitting on his right. Director Choi. Director Choi looked up. Chairman. Call legal. The room changed. The smiles disappeared. Zainab felt her heartbeat in her throat. What is happening? Tae-gyeom looked at the screen once.
Why does my company already own this?
Zainab thought she had misunderstood him. What? Haesun Advanced Materials filed a patent 11 months ago. Her hand lowered. No. The reinforcement geometry is nearly identical. No. We've been running production trials for 8 months. The room seemed to move away from her. Professor Han came around the table. Zainab. She turned. He looked genuinely alarmed. Do not say anything else until we establish what has happened. She stared at him. For 5 years, Professor Han Ji-sung had been the closest thing she had to family in Korea. He had recruited her. He had written the letter that helped secure her visa. He had learned how to pronounce Afolayan without turning it into something easier for himself. When her mother needed surgery in Ibadan, he had reorganized the laboratory schedule so she could fly home. Now he stepped between her and the table. Chairman Yoon, I want this recorded clearly. My student is not being accused of industrial theft. Tae-gyeom's eyes moved to him. I did not accuse her. Good. Han turned to Zainab. Close the presentation. She did not move. Zainab. She looked at the faces around the.
A thief can copy a final answer, but they cannot recreate 4 years of failed experiments.
Table. 10 minutes earlier, they had laughed because they believed her work was impossible. Now the same people were frightened because someone powerful had apparently thought it valuable enough to patent. Why should I close it? Han lowered his voice. Because anything you say now may become evidence. Zainab looked at Tae-gyeom. Your company owns my research? I said there is a patent. On my work. I don't yet know that. I do. Director Choi stood. Chairman, we should suspend the meeting. Zainab laughed once. Nobody else did. Of course. She looked around the boardroom. You were comfortable discussing my incompetence in public. No one answered. But the moment the conversation becomes theft, everyone wants privacy. Tae-gyeom stepped closer. Miss Afolayan. She looked at him. How many prototypes failed before S17? The question confused her. What? Before the stable formulation. 163. Professor Han looked at her. Tae-gyeom continued. You have records? Everyone. Photographs? Yes. Raw furnace data? Yes. Chemical analysis logs? Yes. Zainab placed the remote on the table. You cannot steal failure. The chairman's expression shifted. She pointed at the screen. A thief can copy a final answer. A thief cannot recreate 4 years of mistakes. Nobody spoke. Tae-gyeom nodded once. Good. Good? That's where we start. Professor Han touched her arm. Zainab, come with me. She pulled away. I want to hear what he means. Tae-gyeom looked toward Director Choi. Freeze every S17 related document inside Haesung. Patent drafts. Acquisition files. Test data. Vendor correspondence. Director Choi hesitated. Chairman, that will create an internal compliance event. It is an internal compliance event. Then Tae-gyeom looked at Zainab. I need access to your original records. They're at the university. Professor Han answered before she could. I will personally make sure nothing in her laboratory is touched. Zainab looked at him. There was anger in his face now. Not at her. At Haesung. If someone has taken work from one of my researchers, Han said quietly, they will answer for it. For the first time that morning, Zainab felt less alone. She did not know yet how much that feeling was going to cost her. By midnight, the university had suspended Zainab's laboratory access anyway. The scanner flashed red. She tried again. Red. A security guard approached. Miss Afolayan. My card isn't working. I'm sorry. My notebooks are inside. I received instructions from compliance. Professor Han said my materials would be protected. They are. From me? The guard looked away. That was answer enough. Through the glass, Zainab could see her entire life. Her white coat hanging over the back of her chair. The chipped blue mug her sister had mailed from Nigeria. 3 sample trays beside the furnace. The small wooden elephant her father carved when she was 12. Her research notebook. 20 meters away. Untouchable. Her phone buzzed. Notice of temporary research suspension. Another email arrived. Her thesis defense had been postponed. Then another. Her scholarship funding was under review. Zainab slowly lowered herself to the floor outside the laboratory. She opened her contacts. Mama. Her thumb hovered over the name. Her mother would hear one word and know. She would ask whether Zainab had eaten. Then she would start praying. Then worrying about money. Zainab locked the phone. A shadow moved on the other side of the glass. She looked up. Chairman Yoon Tae-gyeom was standing inside her laboratory. His tie was gone. His jacket hung over one arm. A university compliance officer stood several feet behind him. Tae-gyeom opened the door. How did you get in? Haesung Fund's part of this building. Her face changed. He noticed. That sounded terrible. It sounded accurate. He stepped outside. In one hand was her blue mug. In the other, a clear evidence bag containing the wooden elephant. Zainab stood. What are you doing? Preserving your personal items before the university seals the laboratory. You went through my desk? No. He nodded toward the compliance officer. She did. Everything was photographed. Then the officer emerged carrying Zainab's research notebook in a sealed sleeve. Zainab almost reached for it. She stopped herself. Tae-gyeom noticed. You'll receive a certified copy tonight. Why are you doing this? I'm preserving evidence. Her expression cooled. Of course. What did you want me to say? Nothing. That isn't true. You don't know me. No. His voice softened slightly. But I'm beginning to recognize when you're angry. Then today has been educational. The smallest smile touched his mouth. It disappeared quickly. He handed her a black flash drive. Full server export from your research folder. She stared at it. The university refused to give me access. They refused me too. She looked up. So? I came back with their legal counsel. That's what asking looks like when you're a billionaire. Apparently. She almost smiled. Then remembered why he was there. Your company patented my work. Yes. You're going to make money from it. If the technology performs as expected, a great deal. And you keep talking like this happened to you. His face became still. It did. Zainab laughed bitterly. No, Chairman. She stepped closer. It happened for you. He did not answer. Your company got the patent. Your factories got the prototype. Your executives got their bonuses. Yes. I got locked out of my laboratory. Tae-gyeom looked through the glass. I don't expect you to trust me. Good. I don't even know whether I trust my own company yet. That stopped her. He continued. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to the Incheon materials plant. Why? Because that's where the S-17 pilot line is. Zainab's chest tightened. You're manufacturing it? Testing it. I want to see it. No. She stared at him. You just said you need my help. I need your records. You need the person who created the material. It's an active industrial site. I have spent 5 years beside furnaces. Different furnaces. Chairman Yoon Tae-gyeom. I don't care what your first name is. He almost smiled again. Tomorrow. 7:30. Her eyes narrowed. Are you saying yes? I'm discovering that saying no to you wastes time. The next morning, Zainab stood inside Haesung's Incheon Materials facility wearing a white safety helmet, protective glasses and an orange visitor vest over her cream blouse. The size of the place made her angry. Not because it was impressive. Because her work had grown here without her. Rows of composite panels moved along an automated line beneath white industrial lights. Robotic arms lifted samples toward cutting stations. Technicians in protective clothing moved between thermal chambers. On one wall, behind a glass partition, was a rack of gray panels. Zainab stopped walking. She knew them. Not because of the color. Because of the edges. The faint roughness where rice husk silica had reacted badly with one early binder. She crossed the floor. A technician tried to stop her. Ma'am, please remain behind the line. Zainab leaned closer to the rack. That one. Tae-gyeom came beside her. What? The third panel. Director Choi, walking behind them with two plant managers, frowned. They all came from the same development program. No. Zainab pointed. That one is S12. Tae-gyeom looked at her. You said S12 failed? It did. Director Choi shook his head. These formulations were developed internally. Zainab turned. No, they weren't. His jaw tightened. Our technical team spent 14 months optimizing this material. Then asked them why S12 cracks along the magnesium channels after prolonged heat exposure. Director Choi said nothing. Zainab looked toward the plant manager. Put it in the furnace. The man glanced at Tae-gyeom. The chairman nodded. 10 minutes later, they stood behind reinforced glass as flames surrounded the panel. Temperature climbed. 800 degrees. 900. At 960, a thin fracture appeared across the surface. Zainab did not move. Another fracture formed. She whispered, Right there. Tae-gyeom looked at Director Choi. How did she know? Director Choi's face hardened. She could have seen our testing data. Zainab turned slowly. Our? She stepped toward him. I made that mistake at 2:13 in the morning on a Thursday because I doubled the magnesium fraction while half asleep. Silence. I remember because the furnace alarm woke the entire east wing. She pointed toward the cracked panel. Whoever gave you S17 also gave you S12. Tae-gyeom's expression changed. Not suspicion of Zainab. Something colder. Director Choi. Chairman. Who sold us the technology? Choi hesitated. A research intermediary. Name. Myri Technical Solutions. Zainab looked at Tae-gyeom. He clearly recognized the name. She did not. Who are they? We'll find out. Director Choi stepped in. Chairman, the acquisition passed compliance. Who approved it? Choi paused. I did. There it was. The first real crack inside Haesung. Myri Technical Solutions was registered to a former university patent consultant named Kwon Min-jae. Not Professor Han. Zainab stared at the corporate registry on Tae-gyeom's conference room screen. Professor Han isn't connected? Not that we can prove. She hated herself for feeling relieved. Tae-gyeom noticed. You wanted him to be innocent. He has been my supervisor for 5 years. That wasn't criticism. It sounded like it. I'm not good at comfort. I noticed. Tae-gyeom pushed another file toward her. Myri received 480 million won from Haesung. For S17? Licensing and materials optimization. Who authorized the payment? Director Choi. She looked toward the glass wall of his office. Seoul spread beneath them. So your company bought stolen research from a patent consultant? Possibly. Possibly? Evidence first. She looked back. Now you sound like Professor Han. That's not necessarily an insult. No. She lowered her voice. It isn't. The relief embarrassed her. Professor Han had stood with her in the boardroom. He had called twice since her suspension. He had told her not to panic. He was helping University Council retrieve her laboratory access logs. Maybe she had been wrong to suspect him at all. Tae-gyeom closed the file. There's something else. What? We found 12 other purchases from Myri. Zainab frowned. 12? Different universities. Different researchers. Different technologies. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't only me. No. For the first time, the story became bigger than her. 2 days later, Zainab stood outside the university engineering building and saw her own face on someone's phone. The article headline was visible before the student quickly lowered it. Foreign researcher questioned in industrial patent dispute. Another student whispered. Someone else stared at her. By lunchtime, online comments had turned uglier. She copied Korean technology. She wanted money. Haesung should sue her. Why were universities funding foreigners? Someone had posted her apartment building. That evening, she found a printout taped to her door. Thief. One word in red. Zainab stared at it. Then carefully peeled it away. Folded it. Placed it in her bag. Evidence. She hated that Tae-gyeom was changing the way she thought. She hated even more that she was grateful. When she arrived at Haesung headquarters that night, he took one look at her and stood. What happened? Nothing. That's not true. She dropped the folded paper on his desk. His expression changed. Where? My apartment. He picked up his phone. She placed her hand over it. No. His eyes dropped to her fingers. She pulled back immediately. Don't send men to follow me. Someone knows where you live. They left paper. Today. What does that mean? It means people rarely begin with the worst thing they're willing to do. She frowned. This is corporate theft, not organized crime. Billions of won are involved. I don't want guards. One guard. No. Female. No. Plain clothes. She stared at him. Are you negotiating how secretly to ignore me? Yes. A laugh escaped before she could stop it. Tae-gyeom smiled. Not the careful boardroom almost smile. A real one. It changed his face completely. Zainab looked away too quickly. He noticed that too. Have you eaten? What? It's almost 10. I'm not hungry. That wasn't my question. 20 minutes later, food arrived. Not hotel food. Jollof rice. Zainab stared at the containers. Then at him. Where did you get this? I searched. In Seoul? There are Nigerians in Seoul. Remarkable research, Chairman. Tae-gyeom. No. He opened one container. Try it. The rice was too sweet. The chicken had too much seasoning. The plantain was slightly burnt. It tasted nothing like home. Zainab swallowed. Then, without warning, her eyes filled. She turned away. Tae-gyeom froze. Is it terrible? She laughed through the tears. No. The reviews were very good. It tastes wrong. His face fell so seriously that she laughed harder. And then she was crying harder too. He did not touch her. He did not tell her to be strong. He did not promise everything would be fine. He simply moved the tissue box closer. That kindness hurt more than reassurance would have. My father used to make jollof every Sunday. Tae-gyeom waited. He was terrible at it. Then this should taste familiar. She looked at him. He was serious. A wet laugh escaped her. Then she leaned back. I miss being somewhere people already know who I am. He said nothing. Here I'm always explaining. My name. My hair. Nigeria. Why Nairobi has scientists. Why my research matters. Why I deserve to be in a room before I've even spoken. Her voice became smaller. I'm tired. Tae-gyeom looked down. I know. She raised one eyebrow. He corrected himself. I believe you. That was different. She noticed. Professor Han called the next morning. His voice was tight. Come to campus. Why? Your server logs. What about them? I found something. Zainab arrived 20 minutes later. Han was waiting outside the engineering archive room. He handed her a printed access report. Your research directory was copied 11 months ago. Her hands went cold. By whom? Technician account. Which technician? Kim Yerim. Zainab knew her. 26. Quiet. Careful. One of the few people who sometimes stayed late enough to help Zainab reset the furnaces. Professor Han looked angry. I've asked compliance to bring her in. Why would Yerim sell my work? I don't know. Did she have access to S-17? Technically, yes. Zainab looked at him. Technically? She maintained the backup system. For the first time, suspicion moved somewhere else. Han placed a hand gently on her shoulder. I'm sorry. She looked at him. For what? For allowing you to stand in that room alone while they laughed. Zainab's throat tightened. You defended me when it mattered. Too late. His voice softened. I should have stopped them sooner. She believed him. That was why the next part hurt so much. Kim Yurim denied selling anything. She cried almost immediately.
Professor Han ordered me to do it. I copied your entire project to a private drive.
Zainab stopped. What? Yurim wiped her face. He said the department needed a private backup before the server migration. When? Last year. Where did you send it? To a drive he gave me. Professor Han was not in the room. Tae-gyeom watched through the glass wall outside. Zainab stared at Yurim. He told you to copy my entire project? Yes. Did you know what was in it? No. Did he pay you? No. Did you ever speak to Myri Technical Solutions? Yurim shook her head quickly. I've never heard that name. Zainab closed her eyes. For 1 second, she wanted someone simple to hate. Yurim was right there. The person who physically copied the files. But power had shape. It always had shape. A student technician did not tell a tenured professor no, and then go comfortably back to work. Look at me. Yurim did. Did you know he was going to give anyone my research? No. Then stop apologizing for something you didn't understand. Yurim started crying harder. Outside the room, Tae-gyeom lowered his eyes. Later, in the elevator, he asked, How did you do that? Do what? Not blame her. I didn't say she did nothing wrong. She copied the files. Because someone with power told her to. That mistake may have cost you everything. Zainab looked at him. No. The person with power cost me everything. The elevator descended in silence. Then Tae-gyeom said, You make it difficult to lie to yourself. Good. He looked at her. No. Not always. They confronted Professor Han that afternoon. He did not flinch. I requested the backup. Zainab felt sick. Why? Because our server migration was unstable. Where is the drive? Han's pause was small. Too small for anyone who did not know him. Zainab knew him. Professor. I gave the backup to the university's external patent consultant. Kwon Min-jae? Yes. Why? Because several projects were approaching commercial review. You gave him S-17? I gave him the project archive. Without her permission. Without telling her. The room seemed to tilt. Han stepped closer. Zainab, listen to me. No. The patent consultant was bound by confidentiality. Did you tell him S-17 was mine? Of course. Did you authorize him to commercialize it? No. Tae-gyeom spoke from behind her. Can you prove that? Han looked at him. Yes. That surprised all three of them. Han opened his laptop and produced an email. A formal instruction to Kwon. Review only. No external distribution without inventor consent. Zainab read it twice. Professor Han looked at her. I made a mistake giving him the archive before discussing it with you. Her eyes burned. That's not a small mistake. No. But I did not sell your work. Tae-gyeom studied the email. It appears authentic. Han looked at Zainab. I told you I would stand with you. For the second time, she wanted desperately to believe him. And for the second time, the story shifted. The thief might not be Professor Han. It might not even begin at the university. The midpoint broke open at Haesung's Incheon plant. Tae-gyeom called Zainab just before dawn. I need you here. Why? Because someone deleted the acquisition archive. She sat upright in bed. What? All Myri technical attachments. Gone. When? 3:14 this morning. Who had access? Director Choi's division. By 6:30, Zainab was inside the plant again. This time there were no visitors. No tour. Security had sealed the R&D offices. Tae-gyeom waited beside an internal server terminal. His shirt sleeves were rolled once. He looked like he had not slept. What survived? Factory copies. A technician opened a production folder. Thousands of files appeared. Most had Haesung codes. One did not. Zainab leaned closer. SNIT S17 Thermal RAW. Her university's naming system. Inside Haesung. Not in a patent attachment. Inside an internal development folder created 3 months before the Myri purchase contract. Zainab looked at Tae-gyeom. You had my files before you paid Myri. His face went still. Director Choi, standing behind them, spoke quickly. That doesn't prove anything. Tae-gyeom turned. It proves the official acquisition story is false. Choi's jaw tightened. Chairman, these projects involve hundreds of files from multiple external partners. 3 months. Tae-gyeom stepped closer. Explain how Haesung engineers were testing her raw university data 3 months before our company supposedly acquired the technology. Choi said nothing. Zainab felt anger rising. Not at Professor Han. At Tae-gyeom. At Haesung. At the entire building. You knew. Tae-gyeom turned sharply. No. Someone here knew. Yes. This didn't happen because one professor sold something. No. Your company had a system. His silence confirmed it before he spoke. Zainab laughed bitterly. Research harvesting. Director Choi snapped. That's an inflammatory phrase. She turned on him. What would you prefer? Academic asset optimization? His face hardened. Tae-gyeom looked toward security. Director Choi's access is suspended. Choi stared at him. You cannot be serious. I am. You will destroy this division over one student? Zainab went still. Tae-gyeom did not raise his voice. Doctoral researcher. Whatever. Tae-gyeom stepped closer. You just answered the question. What question? How this happened? Choi's face changed. Tae-gyeom continued. People like you built a process around the assumption that researchers without power would never be able to challenge us. Chairman, think about what you're doing. I am. You are exposing Haesung to litigation across multiple universities. Then perhaps we should stop stealing from them. Choi looked toward Zainab with open contempt. This company employs 40,000 people. And she is one person, Tae-gyeom said. Choi said nothing. That is what you were going to say, isn't it? Tae-gyeom's eyes hardened. One person is exactly how theft works. You reduce a name to a number, then tell yourself the institution matters more. Security approached. Choi was escorted out. Zainab remained beside the server. She did not feel victorious. She felt sick. Tae-gyeom came closer. I didn't know. I believe you. He looked surprised. She continued. That's not the same thing as saying you're innocent. His face changed. No. She looked around the massive factory. Your company benefited because nobody wanted to know. Tae-gyeom nodded slowly. Yes. That answer mattered. By evening, the story was public. Not the truth. A version. Haesung chairman investigates foreign researchers' questionable claim. University launches plagiarism review. Zainab's photograph appeared everywhere. The comments came faster. Liar. Gold digger. Foreign thief. She stopped reading after 10 minutes. Professor Han called twice. She ignored him. Tae-gyeom called once. She ignored him too. At 9:30, someone knocked. She opened her apartment door halfway. Tae-gyeom stood outside. No driver. No security visible. His coat was damp from light rain. How did you get my address? His eyes shifted toward the folded thief paper still sticking out of her evidence bag. I've known it for several days. That's not comforting. You stopped answering. I wanted quiet. I can leave. She looked at him. He did not move toward the door. Did not try to persuade her. That was why she opened it wider. He entered. Her apartment was small. Books stacked near the wall. Research papers on the dining table. One framed photograph of her father beside the television. Tae-gyeom looked at it. Zainab followed his eyes. Engineer Sunday Afolayan. My father. What happened? She had avoided telling him. Now she did. The shopping complex outside Lagos. Her father's safety report. The imported cladding. The report that disappeared. The fire. 26 people. Her father's decision to go back inside. When she finished, Tae-gyeom said nothing for several seconds. Then, "My father would have buried the report too." Zainab stared at him. "Why would you tell me that?" "Because I don't want you mistaking honesty for a defense of my family." He looked toward the photograph. "My father built Haesung. I know. He also bribed inspectors. Buried accident reports. Paid people to make problems disappear." His jaw tightened. "When I was 14, a shipyard worker lost both legs." Zainab waited. "My father visited him in hospital because cameras were outside." His voice became quieter. "On the drive home, he said the worker's wife was useful because grateful people are easier to manage." Zainab looked at him differently. "That's why you removed him." "Partly. You were 20-something. 31. And the board let you. They thought I would become him. Did you?" He looked at her. "I'm still finding out." Silence settled between them. Then Zainab said, "People think powerful men know when something is being done in their name. They don't? That's convenient." "Yes." He held her gaze. "Which is why not knowing cannot be the end of responsibility." Her anger loosened. "Not completely. Enough." They found the next piece of evidence somewhere either expected. Not in a boardroom. Not in a lawyer's file. In a furnace control room. Zainab returned to Incheon to compare the original S12 failure timestamps against Haesung's internal logs. At 11:40 that night, she discovered a photograph embedded in an old engineering report. Her notebook. Not the data. The physical notebook. Open on her laboratory table. The wooden elephant visible in the upper corner. She stared at the image. "Tae-gyeom." He came behind her. She pointed. "That photograph was taken in my lab." He zoomed in. A man's cuff reflected faintly in the stainless steel surface beside the notebook. Dark suit. Silver university pin. Zainab's stomach tightened. She knew that pin. Senior faculty. Professor Han wore one every day. "No." Tae-gyeom said nothing. "No." She stepped backward. "We already know he gave Kwon the backup." "Yes." "He said that was all." "Yes." Zainab closed her eyes. "Find the original image." They did. Metadata. 7 months before the patent. Photographer field blank. Device registered to Han Ji-sung. Zainab sat down. Tae-gyeom did not touch her. He lied. "Yes. He stood in that boardroom and defended me." Tae-gyeom remained silent. "He told me he was sorry they laughed." Her voice cracked. "He made me think he was protecting me." Tae-gyeom crouched several feet away so she did not have to look up at him. "Maybe part of him believed he was." "Don't. I'm not defending him." "Then don't make him complicated." Tae-gyeom waited. Zainab wiped her face. "I need him to be simple right now." "Then he is." That made her cry harder. Not loudly. She bent forward, elbows on her knees, one hand over her eyes. Tae-gyeom stayed where he was. After a while she whispered, "Why didn't you touch me?" He looked confused. "You were crying. Most people touch someone when they're crying. I wasn't sure you wanted me to." She looked at him. For the first time, she realized how carefully he had been learning her. Not how to manage her. How not to. She held out her hand. Tae-gyeom looked at it. Then took it. Nothing dramatic happened. No confession. No kiss. Just his hand around hers in a furnace control room while the evidence that destroyed her faith in Professor Han glowed on a monitor beside them. It was enough. Han finally told the truth when they confronted him.
I gave them access. I did not believe you could commercialize it yourself.
It was my invention to fail at.
Him with the photograph. Not all at once. Truth rarely arrived that cleanly. I never intended for Haesung to take ownership. Zainab sat across from him in an empty seminar room. Tae-gyeom remained outside. She had asked for that. This is between me and him. Han looked tired. Older. What did you intend? I wanted industry interest. Without telling me. Because you would have refused. Exactly. You were too protective of the research. It was mine. It was science. It was mine. Han flinched. Zainab leaned forward. You don't get to use noble words to make theft sound academic. His face tightened. I gave Kwon preliminary access. And photographs. Yes. And S12. Yes. And S17. Silence. Say it. Han looked at her. Yes. Zainab breathed through the pain. Why? Because nobody was taking it seriously. I was. You were a doctoral student. There it was. The sentence changed everything. Han continued. You had no commercialization plan. No manufacturing contacts. No Korean patent strategy. No investor relationships. So you sold it. I positioned it. You sold it. I created an opportunity. For yourself? For the research. Zainab stared at him. Han's composure began to crack. Do you think Haesung would have paid hundreds of millions for a formulation presented by an unknown Nigerian student? Zainab went very still. No. Han blinked. They probably wouldn't have. For half a second, relief appeared on his face. Then she said, and that's the problem. His expression changed. You decided my work could become valuable only after my name disappeared. That's not what happened. You took the scientist out so the science would look respectable. Zainab. You taught me that knowledge belongs to everyone. Her voice trembled. I believed you. Han looked down. You didn't share my science. A tear slipped down her cheek. You erased the scientist. He said nothing. That silence ended 5 years between them. The university scheduled a disciplinary hearing. Haesung scheduled an emergency board vote. Both were set for the same week. Professor Han released selective emails before the hearing. Messages showing Zainab asking Haesung engineers technical questions about commercial panels. Out of context, they looked terrible. Her immigration status became uncertain. Her scholarship remained suspended. Then Tae-gyeom's board moved against him. 3 directors demanded he settle privately. Pay Zainab. Keep the patent. Protect the company. His uncle, Vice Chairman Yoon Sang-ho, requested a private meeting with Zainab. She nearly refused. Then she went. 5 billion won. That was the number on the contract. Zainab stared at it. You could return to Nigeria wealthy, Sang-ho said. That's your pitch? You could build a laboratory. Fund scholarships. Take care of your mother. Her eyes lifted. You researched my family? Of course. That's supposed to make me trust you. It's supposed to make you realistic. She closed the folder. My father died because somebody decided safe materials were too expensive. And now Haesung can make your material available worldwide. Under your company's name. Under a company capable of producing it. Zainab pushed the folder back. No. Sang-ho sighed. Chairman Yoon is risking his position over you. I'm not asking him to. Perhaps not. He smiled. But you should understand what is happening. She stood. I do. No. His smile thinned. You think this is only about morality. What else is it about? My nephew is falling in love with you. Zainab froze. Sang-ho watched the reaction. There. She collected her bag. Good evening. Do not confuse obsession with integrity. She stopped at the door. Then turned. Do not confuse cynicism with intelligence. She left. For 2 days she avoided Tae-gyeom. On the 3rd night he found her asleep at the conference table inside Haesung's legal archive room. She had spent 11 hours comparing patent drafts. Her cheek rested against one arm. A pencil remained between her fingers. Tae-gyeom stopped when he saw her. He removed his jacket, placed it carefully across her shoulders. Zainab moved. Her hand closed around his wrist. He froze. She did not wake. He could have pulled away. He didn't. He sat beside her. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. His phone vibrated. He silenced it. When Zainab finally opened her eyes, she saw their hands first. She released him immediately. Oh God! Tae-gyeom looked at his wrist. You have surprisingly strong hands. Why didn't you move? You were asleep. That's not an answer. It seemed rude. She looked at the jacket over her shoulders. You covered me? The room is cold. She pulled it off. Their fingers touched when she returned it. Neither moved for a second. Then Zainab looked away. Your uncle thinks you're in love with me. Tae-gyeom went completely still. She looked back. That's the part where you're supposed to laugh. I don't think he's wrong. Silence. Zainab forgot how tired she was. Tae-gyeom's eyes stayed on hers. I didn't plan to say that tonight. Clearly. I had something more controlled prepared. She almost smiled. Of course you did. He sat back. I am not risking the company for you. I know. I'm risking my position because the patent isn't ours. I know. His voice became quieter. But I am sitting here at 2:43 in the morning because of you. Her breath caught. Tae-gyeom looked at her lips. Then back at her eyes. Zainab whispered. That sounds dangerous. It probably is. He did not kiss her. That was why she wanted him to. The hearing began with Professor Han denying theft. It ended with his own presentation destroying him. Zainab sat alone on one side of the university chamber. Han sat opposite with two lawyers. Tae-gyeom was at the back. Not beside her. She had asked him not to be. I need to win this as a researcher. He had nodded. Not as a chairman's woman. Not as somebody's romantic interest. As Zainab Afolayan. Her attorney displayed an early commercial presentation recovered from Haesung's factory archive. Slide 19. A photograph of Zainab's notebook. Her father's photograph visible in the corner. The committee chair looked at Han. Professor, can you explain why Miss Afolayan's private research notebook appears in a presentation made to a corporate intermediary before she authorized commercialization? Han's face changed. I believe I was acting in the project's best interest. Did you obtain her consent? No. Did you disclose the consulting fee? Silence. Zainab looked at him. How much? Han did not answer. Her lawyer placed the payment on screen. 120 million won transferred from Kwan's consultancy to Han's private company. The room went silent. Zainab felt something inside her finally settle. Not heal. Settle. Han looked at her. I was going to include you when the agreement matured. She almost laughed. Include me? Zainab. In my own invention? You were a student. So? You didn't understand the commercial world. And you did. Yes. That's why you deserved my name too? Han looked away. Zainab's voice became quiet. You could have asked me. You would have said no. Then you knew. He looked at her. You knew it was wrong because you knew you needed me not to know. That was the end. Not legally. Emotionally. The committee suspended Han before the afternoon session ended. The criminal and civil investigations would take months. Zainab no longer needed to watch every part. She had her evidence. She had her name. Now Haesung had to decide what kind of company it wanted to be. The emergency board meeting began the following morning. Tae-gyeom stood at the head of the same type of polished table where Zainab had first been laughed at. This time she watched from the back. Director
Haesung will relinquish all claims to S-17.
Chairman, this is absolute madness!
Choi had been suspended pending investigation. Documents from 12 other research acquisitions had been turned over to independent counsel. Vice Chairman Sang-ho looked furious. One director slammed his hand against the table. You are exposing the company to catastrophic liability. No, Tae-gyeom said. The conduct created the liability. I'm exposing the conduct. Another director leaned forward. We bought the patent in good faith. We had her university files before the purchase. Through an intermediary. We chose not to ask why. Silence. Sang-ho spoke. 40,000 employees should not pay for the ethical purity of one chairman. Tae-gyeom looked at him. This isn't purity. He glanced toward Zainab. Then back to the board. It's accounting. Sang-ho frowned. Tae-gyeom continued. If Haesung's value includes property we do not own, then that value is false. He placed the document on the table. Effective immediately, Haesung relinquishes all ownership claims to S-17. The room erupted. Tae-gyeom waited. Then, we will offer Dr. Afolayan a manufacturing agreement if she wants one. She retains ownership. She controls licensing. Haesung earns only what she agrees to pay us for production. A director stood. And if shareholders remove you? Tae-gyeom's expression did not change. Then they remove me. Zainab felt tears sting her eyes. Not because he was giving her something. He wasn't. That was the point. He was returning what had never belonged to him. 3 months later, the patent was refiled. Inventor. Dr. Zainab Afolayan. Her doctorate was awarded the same week. The ceremony was smaller than she expected. Her mother watched from Nigeria through a shaky video call and cried loudly enough for the people around Zainab to hear. Professor Han's seat was empty. Zainab looked at it once. Then never again. Outside the hall, Tae-gyeom waited beside the steps. No board members. No lawyers. No security hovering nearby. Just him. You came. You told me not to. I said you didn't have to. Same thing. She smiled. He looked at the diploma in her hand. Doctor. Chairman. Tae-gyeom. She laughed. Then he handed her a small envelope. What's this? Before you accuse me of buying you something, open it. Inside was one photograph. A construction site in Ibadan. New foundations. A modest sign beside them. Sunday Afolayan Materials Research Center. Zainab stopped breathing. She looked at him. Before you become angry, Haesung does not own it. Her eyes filled immediately. He continued quickly. A Nigerian engineering foundation purchased the land. Nairobi is partnering on the research program. Your university is donating equipment. Haesung is contributing manufacturing support. How much? A reasonable amount. Tae-gyeom. A very reasonable amount. She laughed through the tears. He smiled. Zainab looked again at her father's name. I wish he could see it. Tae-gyeom did not tell her that he could. He knew her too well for that now. Instead he said, You made sure other fathers won't die the same way. Zainab closed her eyes. That was enough. When she opened them, Tae-gyeom was watching her. Not the researcher. Not the woman whose case had threatened his company. Her. She stepped closer. Do you remember the first thing you ever said to me? Go back 2 slides. The other thing. He smiled. Why does my company own this? You were very irritating. I've improved. Barely. He reached for her hand. This time she gave it willingly. Around them, graduates spilled out into the afternoon. Families took photographs. Students laughed. Nobody in the crowd knew that 3 months earlier Zainab had believed 5 years of her life had disappeared into someone else's patent. Nobody needed to. She knew what remained. Her father's name. Her own name. Her work. And the man beside her who had finally understood something she had spent the whole story proving. Love was not ownership. Neither was power. Neither was gratitude. The only things worth keeping were the things people chose to give freely. Zainab looked at Tae-gyeom. Are you taking me home? He raised an eyebrow. Your home? She smiled. No. His expression changed. Zainab laughed, pulled him toward her, and kissed him before he could say another word. Behind them, the university doors closed softly. For once, there was nothing left inside that building she needed to prove.